Hello everyone. It's James again. And in today's video, I want to talk about something very important. And that's Stockholm Syndrome. And why it's important to understand what it is. And how it can affect you in your everyday life. Stockholm Syndrome is when a person that is being abused, mistreated, held captive, or wronged by another person, starts to identify with and even defend the person that is mistreating them. The person being abused often has sympathy and empathy for their abuser and will oftentimes stay in an abusive situation because of these feelings. So how does this affect you in your everyday life? First, I want to talk about men. Even though Stockholm Syndrome applies to both men and women. The reason why I want to talk about men first is, for starters, I'm a man. Secondly, we live in a society where men are taught from being young boys to put up with and take the abuse any woman in is like made to shout. Everywhere a young man looks, he has no positive images on what walking away from an abusive woman looks like. However, when you turn on your television, you are shown image after image of the so-called strong woman, controlling every situation she encounters. Her being the hero and saving a man from his own so-called stupidity, or rescuing herself, or a female friend from an abusive male. Now I want to say to any woman listening to this, keep in mind, we have to go over this information. Because if you want to fix things, we need to look at the brutal honest truth. Secondly, many of you have young boy children. And I would hope you want your young boys to learn and know that it's not okay for them to be abused, used, and mistreated. Just as it's wrong for anyone to abuse or mistreat a woman. We are all human beings living in this world. But sadly, the accepted mistreatment towards men has been bred very deeply into our culture. And men as a whole with a certain helplessness and Stockholm Syndrome-like traits that carry over from one generation to the next. And though yes, there are many women that experience this as well. Sadly, they also fall victim to this despite some of the powerful women type role models she might have. The reason being is she might have been abused as a child. She might suffer from low self-esteem, just like male victims often do. But we as a society are addressing it with women and have been for decades. But when anyone dares speak up for a man in this manner, people get upset. When all that is trying to be done is to educate everyone that abuse is wrong. And unfortunately, not many are telling men it's not okay for them to be abused as well. Quite the opposite is happening actually. There are many telling men that them being abused and used as a resource for others is normal. Hence the Stockholm Syndrome of today's male. And the future Stockholm Syndrome of your young boys. So what happens with Stockholm Syndrome with both males and females? Oftentimes this person, unknowingly, gets sucked into the sweet-mean cycle that I've talked about before. And if you're not familiar with the sweet-mean cycle, it's where a toxic abusive person, and this can be emotionally abusive, physically abusive, or otherwise, they come on strong with nice treatment. Overly nice. They might buy gifts. They might call you all the time. And they will pour an above average amount of attention on you. Then out of nowhere, usually a few months later, they switch gears seemingly for no reason. They treat you really bad. They might pick a nasty argument with you. They might start to criticize you for no apparent reason. If they are physically abusive, they might pick a nasty argument physically striking you. Now I will digress here for one moment. For you women that have young boys, realize and know that the statistics show that women are more likely to provoke violence and start a violent encounter with their male counterpart. And the reason for this is they know that since men shouldn't hit women, and they know the penalties are stiff for a man that hits a woman, and they feel there is a lot less of consequence for women that hit men. And because of this, many women that have toxic personalities have the ability to become very violent against men they are involved with. Knowing this can help you teach your young sons to avoid these pitfalls, as we so rightfully teach our young daughters to do the same. Now back on track to what we were talking about. This toxic person switches gears from being nice to mean, seemingly for little to no reason at all, only to leave the person this is being done to stunned and baffled. Because just a few months earlier things were going so well. Now they are being mistreated over a misunderstanding, or maybe nothing at all. And what starts to happen is the person being mistreated wrongly pleads with their abuser as to why this is happening to them, questioning why this abusive person is acting this way. This pleading and questioning process is the start of the Stockholm Syndrome process for the victim without them knowing it. Because, if you're asking why a person is treating you bad, then you have already lost. They know full well what they are doing. And they are doing it on purpose. And when your abuser see this in you, they see that you care enough to inquire as to why they are acting abusive. The abuser sees this as a sign of weakness. And they will then use this weakness to bend and twist you with their will. This allows them to switch gears back to being nice. Because they know that's what you want to see. And it's a good way for them to get you to develop more of a sense of love, sympathy, and empathy for them. So the next time they switch gears to being mean, during this sweet mean cycle, they know you will stay. And not only stay, but stay willingly. Because you now have Stockholm Syndrome. They know you will stupidly go to the ends of the earth to try to help them overcome their problem of treating you meanly and abusing you. To the point you will lie to others about how bad the treatment really is, or defend their behavior to others. All because you are in love, and under the Stockholm Syndrome spell. And you hope that one day they will see the light and love you back. The person being abused sadly doesn't realize, nor will they realize that this love is painfully one-sided. Because they are completely codependent, and so in love with their abuser. So much so they have put up a mental block getting rid of any idea of escape from this situation. And Stockholm Syndrome is in effect. This can be the same when dealing with a friend, a co-worker, or a boss at work. You can be held captive at a job you work at, all the while taking abuse, and trying to give your abuser the benefit of the doubt, and sadly trying to see their point of view. You might even go out of your way to be their friend, or help them with special projects, believing this will somehow get them to see the light, and hoping they will somehow develop and have empathy and sympathy for you, which sadly never happens. It just opens the doors for more abuse towards you at the hands of your abuser. Falling in love, or wanting to become friends with your abuser is a dangerous thing. It can cost you all of your money, your mental health, your time, and even your life in extreme cases. We owe it to ourselves to be educated, and to learn how these things work, and how these abusive people operate in our society, and how we can raise both our young boys and girls. Again, we need to raise both our boys and girls with equal understanding that falling in love with an abusive person is wrong. That we are better than that. That we deserve better than that. And we all need to stand up and point out where our society is failing our young boys in this area. That our young boys are not to grow up to being human shields, and to be abused by any woman despite the horrible images they see on TV, and that our young boys and young girls will grow up with the same education on how to avoid getting involved with abusive people. Like I always say, knowledge is power. The more we know, the more we can live happy and healthy lives. Until next time. Bye for now. And be good to yourself.